comes actually from a book that Libby introduced me to. I won't try and explain it. It's not that common a book, but it's a very interesting book should you ever read it. And it had some ideas in it that rather appealed to us. There are a lot of other, not so much books as magazines, that influenced our thinking. So what used to be called soft technology and now Renew had lots of ideas in it that quite appealed to us. I think I bought when I was a student the very first edition of Earth Garden, and still read that. And so this really great house with its wonderful technologies had to be in the country. There were things like Owner Builder, all of these quirky things around houses and so on that inspired us. And so somehow it was the idea of trying to put that together. And in the middle 1990s, the idea of having a place in the country, a farm or a country property, something to grow things, some place to actually implement all of these great technologies, just really appealed. And so in 1999, we bought Islandia. There it is. And that's an aerial shot of our property. So we have the lane, and we've got a few paddocks. These are bush foods. Those are mountain peppers that we've planted. So it's our west paddock and south paddock, our east paddock, fruit orchard, shed and house. And when we bought the property, it was a partly built structure. It was originally meant to be a mud brick house. It faced completely the wrong direction. So we weren't too enthralled with the original plan, but we were fond of the original structure because it was a clear story. I never know how to pronounce it. Clear story is Celestri, take a pick. Roof, so one of those with a sort of window in the front, and it faced almost but not quite due north, 10 degrees east of north actually. So it was pretty good in terms of its orientation and so on. So there was a partly built house, nice property, 13 acres, in a lovely part of the world, which is South Gippsland, which is a cool, wet climate, grazing and dairying area. Not too far from Wilson's Prom. So think about due north of Wilson's Prom and due east actually of Liam Gaffer, if that is So that's our place, that's Islandia. And in designing it, in thinking about it, there were a few things we wanted to achieve. We wanted the property, the house really, to provide all of the energy that we used, and perhaps a little bit more, just in case. We wanted it to provide all the water that we would need, and a little bit more, just in case. And most of the food that we use, and of course just a little bit more to share with friends and family and so on. So basically we wanted it to cover our mainstream needs. And we wanted it to be simple, sustainable, healthy, local, that is using materials from the local area if we could. Certainly comfortable, low maintenance because we weren't expecting to live there full time for quite a while, and beautiful. And we think we've covered most of those. Let me tell you an ATA story though about where the passive comes in. As Chris mentioned, quite a few years ago I was very much involved in the Melbourne Branch, and like Chris has organised this event, I used to organise events. And we went to a property at Piersdale, which is on the, what is that? The other Mornington Peninsula. And for those of you who are familiar with the technology of the ATA and Renew and so on, the heyday of that technology was actually the 1970s. And in the 1970s, there were all of these organisations trying to think of how to do solar heated and solar powered houses. And there was work being done at MIT and sorts of places. And they had wonderful designs involving lots of fans and moving air around, great banks of rocks in basement and so on, and heat stores and all sorts of weird stuff. And the place in Piersdale had been designed and built at that time. And it's a lovely house. And in talking to the people there, though, they said, well, we put all this stuff in, but actually we don't use it. We don't need it, because the house is well insulated, it's well sealed, it's well oriented. It works very well without all that stuff. And so there really is a difference between a passive solar house and an active solar house. And an active solar house, and I should admit that once upon a time I was call myself an engineer. So I like stuff that whizzes and bangs and flashes lights and so on. But you don't need much of it to actually build a really good house. And I can prove that, and I will. So we decided to build a simple house, and it's a passive solar house, not an active solar house. There is a distinction. Anyway, let's be a little bit clearer then about what a passive solar house is. A passive solar house has a good orientation, which basically means in the southern hemisphere it faces north, pretty much. And it also means it has good insolation, that is good sunlight entry. So that means that it will have most of its windows on the north side, a bit on the east, not so much on the west, and none on the south, which is incidentally the exact opposite of the original design of the structure that we bought, which was facing south. So, yeah. Anyway, so getting the insolation right and the orientation then helps that, it makes a big difference. If you get the eaves right, then you have relatively little sunlight entering in summer and you have lots in winter. And if you get the external shading in place as well, that covers the other bits of the year and the other times of day. As well, for a passive solar house, you will have an appropriate amount of thermal mass. That's used for storing heat, and it's used for storing coof, if there is such a word. It certainly helps in summer. And in our case, we built on a slab, so that means we have a concrete floor. We also have brick and masonry behind the fireplace, and the walls are rendered, so they are about an inch thick on the inside with lined render, an inch thick on the outside, but it's the inside bit that makes the difference. So we have quite a bit of thermal mass. You then need insulation to keep the heat and the coof inside, and so we have insulation, of course, with Strawbale walls on both sides, which is highly insulating, extremely effective. But we also have quite a lot in the roof. When we bought the structure, the rafters are about this big, and so we filled in half with polyester bats, and the other half is an airspace and then the sarking. So we've got a lot of insulation in the roof as well, which really helps. We have, every single window, every single door and bit of glass is double glazed. Absolutely. If you don't use double glazing, you're nuts. It's very good value in Victoria, really helpful, makes a big difference. Just foolish not to use it, which I realise I'm saying that most of the houses in Victoria are foolish, so be it. They really do make a difference. And if they're nice and well designed so that they're locked down tight, you don't have drafts. Now, not having drafts makes a noticeable difference. We find that a temperature in the house, our country place, of 18 degrees is quite pleasant, and a temperature of 20 degrees in suburbia, where we are at the moment most of the time, is uncomfortably cold. Mostly, I think, because of drafts. So really stopping down the drafts, sealing doors and windows properly, makes a very big difference. And of course, the walls being rendered are very well sealed anyway. There's another reason why we have slab on ground, incidentally. Well, there's actually two reasons. One is that from time to time I've gone under the house we have in the suburbs, and I hate it. So with a slab, I never have to go under the house again. But there is actually a better reason, and they're called wombats. And in South Gippsland, we do have wombats, and they do dig holes, and they're beautiful creatures, but I don't want one living under the house. So wombat proofing is a good reason to do slab on ground. We don't actually have insulation under the slab though. There's a sort of a debate about that in the temperate climate. You certainly do see houses being built with insulation under the slab in Melbourne. The advantage in summer by connecting the slab to the ground is it's a little bit cooler. The disadvantage in winter is that it's a little bit cooler. So it's a bit of a trade-off. I don't think in Victoria it makes a big difference, and certainly the summer coolness is nice. So we voted not to put insulation under the slab, but I can appreciate people having different opinions on that. Finally, ventilation is important, and the layout of the house is basically open plan, but all of the doors and windows are designed to be open, so we have openable casement windows that open nice and wide. The celestry is awning windows that we can actually leave open even if it's raining, and we can easily open it up and have air movement. The high celestry or awning vents are actually really nice in summer. You leave those open at night and any hot air is dissipated, draws in cool air overnight, which means the whole house cools down and the thermal mass cools down with cool, and you're set for the next day. So that combination then of orientation, insulation, thermal mass, and ventilation are the attributes of a passive solar house. And the best book I know that goes through that is one from the Australian Greenhouse Office called Your House, which is, I would really recommend reading. And it's certainly where I'm coming from, because I didn't make all this up. Anyway, so that was what we were moving towards. This is in fact what we bought. In fact, that's a rather neat and tidy version of what we bought, because when we bought it, it had all sorts of things underneath it, including an old caravan, bits and bobs. But what you can see is what was meant to be a posted beam house with mud brick. And what we have done there, this is the stage where it's been cleared out and levelled for the slab ready to be poured. So this is a somewhat tidier version. Our neighbours for many years, this was actually built by the sister of our neighbours, and she sort of got so far and then they ran out of puff and money and kids came along and stuff.
Is it treated pine, those posts?
They're certainly treated. They're not, I don't know whether they're pine or not. They were popular in the 60s or 70s or something. They've actually got a sort of twisty pattern around them where they were made. And we've actually sealed them inside the house. But yes, they've been treated. So that's what it looked like the day before the slab was poured, and that's what it looks like when the slab was poured. So a couple of things to notice. I mentioned that we have deep rafters, so those are the deep rafters. You can see the clerestory, celestry windows there, that's where they go. The slab we had coloured on top. We got the guys to sprinkle some oxide in and then they trailed that over. We asked them to make it look a bit like terracotta. They did a really good job. It does look like terracotta. We had considered perhaps getting it, what's the word, ground down. And so I was a bit concerned that might be slippery, actually. Don't know. In any event, we thought we'd give this a go. So it's basically just a concrete floor, coloured, and then we've sealed over it so that it doesn't dust and so on. Show you what it looks like later on. We're quite fond of it. And that's the caravan. A bit of a tradition that to have a caravan on site, hanging out at a country property. Not entirely legal, but anyway, it's fine. If you'd like to buy a caravan, then you'll be happy to sell it to you. And you've got to have the shed, of course, that goes with any property. This is the structure then going in. So there are two sorts of strawbale houses, load-bearing and non-load-bearing, or infill. This is just infill. And as a consequence, it required no acts of faith on the part of the local shire, and they had no difficulty at all improving it. So it all sails through with no difficulty. So it's just a very conventional wooden structure, and a bit deeper though to hold the bales, and it has another little feature. On the base of this is a little drain, and that's because if there ever should be water that comes from a washing machine or something, you don't want the bales sitting in water. I mean, it doesn't even matter in straw bales. In any house, you don't want stuff sitting in water. So that's the reason why we have this little gravel drain there, and then the bales are stacked on top. Now, if you're wondering what these things are, those pipes are meant for wires. As the bales are put on, when they get to a certain height, a wire is run around the bottom and up over the top of them, and then down the other side, a gripple is put on, it's all tightened up, and the bales are compressed. And you need to compress bales because in time they actually settle. So by tensioning the wires, by pre-tensioning and by pre-compressing them, you avoid having problems with the bales just settling onto the render falling off and stuff. So that's what the wires are for. I'll sort of point them out in a minute, because you can see the gripples anyway. But that's what they're for. I'm sure you're wondering that. Now this is the structure with the bales put into the walls, and I saw them pretty close. Just there. See those shiny things there? Those are gripples. Do you know what a gripple is, incidentally? So they're an attachment for wires, with wires in either end, and they just grab them. And so they're really good for joining wires. And you can crank them down really tight. Why did we choose straw? Do you want to say why we choose straw? Go on.
Well, we chose straw because South Gippsland can be very cold in winter, and we wanted a house that we could come to that was warm and didn't take a long time to heat up. And straw has a very good insulation quality, and so we wanted a house that was very, very well insulated. As well, it also has a sort of I feel like adobe when you have the render on it, and we liked that look very much.
We have the deep reveals around windows,
yes,
which look ever so
and also it's very good for bushfires as well. When it's rendered, it's one of the best materials for resisting fire. So we thought it would be quite suitable for our
there's two things you can do with Strawbale in rendering it. Oh, well, first of all, there's two choices in render. One is concrete and another is lime. We looked around at lots of Strawbale houses and we saw that the concrete invariably cracked, which I thought looked a little bit ugly. Now, lime render can crack as well. The nice thing about lime render is though there is a routine in putting on a lime wash, which is just lime in water, and you paint that on every few years, and it actually fills in the cracks and things. So it looks, we thought, better, and so we realised we were, putting ourselves up for a bit of maintenance there, but a non-cracked whitewashed wall we thought looked better than a cracked concrete wall. So that was the choice we made. The alternative would have been to put cladding over the whole lot. And the reason why there are furring strips up here is to attach cladding to it. Because while I didn't mind lime washing down low, to get up here requires getting up in a cherry picker. And that's no fun. So I did it once, and it was no fun. So I don't want to do it again. So these furring strips are for cladding, and you'll see the Colin cladding. We could have put Colin cladding all the way down, but then it wouldn't have looked like a Strawbale house on the outside. So that was the choice we made. Ask questions, incidentally, if you want on the way through.
Did you, under the cladding, do you still seal the bales with render?
I'll show you.
Let's go back to the original point of the slab. How do you insulate this under a slab? What do you do?
We don't. Oh, well, we don't insulate them in the slab, but you can get polystyrene, big slabs of polystyrene. What are they called? Waffle pots. Yeah. So we could have put those down, and our builder would have been quite happy. So it's very common practice, but we didn't. So it's just conventional bits of plastic down and then concrete on. Anyway, so this is what it looks like when it's partially rendered. And so to answer the question, whoops, sorry, there you can see what it looks like under the cladding. Okay. There are 3 coats that go on. The first is just a sort of a scratch coat, which is designed to sort of, it's a nice rough surface to take the rest, and it's designed to push into the straw and catch on the straw. Then there's a fill coat, which is a thicker coat that gives you most of the depth of the render, and then there's a finish coat, which is troweled on and finished so that it looks ever so sweet. And so you have the 3 coats. We had it all sprayed on. So we've known people who did own a builder, they put it on by hand and so on. I'm sure their lives were enriched through it. But it wasn't what we set out to do. So theirs is nice and ours is nice too. But we paid people to come in and do it. So we paid a group out of Castlemaine to come down and do the spray rendering. And they did the whole walls in fact. So they assembled the walls, put on the spray render, and finished up the building.
Did you consider including an insulative component within the render?
No. The straw bales are enormously, they're this thick. So they are really, really, really good insulators. You don't need to insulate anything in the render. What we did do though, is I mentioned that concrete render typically cracks. It cracks in a particular place, and that is on the corners of doors and windows. And so what we did do is we put down a mesh around the edges of doors and windows to reduce the cracking that would otherwise have happened. Now, it might still happen a little bit, but it won't happen very much. And some people do think they mix in horsehair or things as a sort of fibrous component to the render to try and do that. We actually put metal mesh down. Now, there's one small issue with metal mesh. It actually stops radio waves. And consequently, we are effectively living in a Faraday cage, if that means anything to people with an engineering background. It means that our radio reception is absolute shit. It really is. If we want to hear the radio, we have to put it in the window. Anyway.
So have you got the mesh all around it? Or just
well, as you can see, there's lots of doors and windows, so there's lots of mesh. And also, and the doors and windows themselves, the openable ones, have fly screen on them, which is also really good for stopping radio waves.
What, metal fly screen?
Yeah.
Aluminium? Not, not fiberglass?
No.
And how far is your mesh? A foot wide sort of thing?
Around that.
Yeah. So there's holes in it, but it's still giving you a fair shielding effect.
The radio waves are bigger, so they don't get through.
Sorry, would some people use chicken wire type of instead of the wire of grapples and things like that? So
well, they still typically will compress it. They don't use the chicken wire for compression. They use it against the render.
So we don't still have the same radio?
Not as much. Not as much. We used it's called expanded metal mesh, and that's sort of fine holes. These, were I to do it again, I would probably use a plastic mesh, which then might let some of the radio waves through.
What kind of window box have you used? And
What sort of window?
Window box.
Just heavy wooden ones.
Studs.
Yeah. So that's the. It's very conventional construction. So there's a window there, I think. Is that a window? Yeah, that's a window. South of the house.
So that's the bunk on the right.
Yeah. And well, those are actually windows there too. Actually. So the window's slot in there. You can see the bunks in place there. It's all very conventional construction. The wood framing. And our builder had no problem with that whatsoever. He was a builder who does bespoke houses, so every house is different anyway as far as he's concerned. So doing another house that was different was neither here nor there. So that helped.
So was this the first Strawbale one?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
But we had to work to find the people to do the straw bale assembling, putting the straw bales in place, and the gripples and wires and the spray render and so on. We had to source that for him, and he worked with them. Once he'd seen them do it, he actually remarked that he would be quite comfortable doing another one himself. It's not rocket science. Although getting the spraying concrete render is a bit of an art for him, and getting the gear right. Lime render. But it's very much like the same technology used for making ground pools. They often spray concrete to do ground pools. So it's the same sort of thing. It's not that unusual.
Yeah, can we use earth renders on this floor?
You can. Let me tell you why we didn't. We went to Strawbale Construction Workshop out from Hepburn Springs, and we were in a building that was earth rendered. And while Strawbale building was earth rendered, and while the chap was chatting, we noticed that there were little holes around the wall. And from time to time, a mouse would poke its nose out and go scurrying around.
Okay.
And we concluded that an earth rendered Strawbale wall was a really good place for rodents. And so we went to lime because the rodents don't eat the lime, or rather, if they try to, their guts corrode and they stop.
Oh.
So lime render is good for rodents. Earth render, have fun.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
How thick was the render?
It's about an inch.
About an inch, that was
20,
3 coats.
25, 30 millimetres, yeah. And that's in 3 coats.
And there's no problem with that initial coat not going on, you're not using mesh at all, just going with the first coat raw straight
Oh
on.
yeah. But then spraying it on, it penetrates fairly
Yes,
well.
yeah.
And these were guys who'd done it many times before.
Yeah.
Who did you use in
Country Spray Render.
Sorry?
Country Spray Render, I think their name is. They were pretty good, but I mean, they were from the other side of Melbourne. We had to pay to bring them in and stay on. Well, they didn't stay on site; they stayed nearby and so on. So it was an expense in doing it.
What's the straw you use?
Wheaten straw, I think. They brought the straw with them,
Oh, okay.
so that wasn't local. Anyway. Okay. There you can see the little extension to the roof. So that's getting the eave angle right over the clerestory windows, so you don't get much sunlight coming through in summer. So it's just the way that the architect chose to deal with the eave angles. And we did work with an architect. It was a lady called Bridget Pushka, who lives in St Kilda. She's a green architect, and she was really good to work with. We literally spent a couple of years, 3 years, longer, working with her to get the design just so, and then getting the windows and so on.
Your clerestory windows, were they double glazed and openable or just louvered or?
So you can see them there.
Yeah.
They're double glazed, and the centre sections are openable. And in fact, they're openable by remote control. So we have some buttons downstairs, and we push them, and they go close them. So, really good having that the ability to dump heat out of the upper part of the rooms in summer works really well. In winter, there is the danger of warm air stagnating up there, which we deal with by having a ceiling fan to push it back down. But I think having high vents like that is a really great idea. Works wonderfully. Let's see, what else do we have? We've had the roofing iron replaced there. We've got the doors and windows in now. They're Rylock doors and windows. They're aluminium on the outside and wood on the inside. So there's a thermal break as a consequence. So they don't leak heat through the doors and windows. They close up or crank down really nice and tight. They're a bit pricey, but they are easily a good investment. So really recommend good quality double glazed windows.
Even double glazed, you can lose a lot of heat through a window. Do you have what sort of floor and what sort of window coverings do you?
None,
No?
at all. Now, interestingly, we borrowed an infrared camera just a few weeks ago and went around the place looking to see where heat came out. And the place where the heat came out, much to my amazement, there's a couple of doors we have to seal, the ones that aren't Rylock, incidentally. But the main place that we saw the heat coming out was the edge of the slab, which we have to keep exposed for termite monitoring. So that really threw me. I was not expecting to see that. But anyway, that's where the heat comes out. The doors and windows are just fine, thank you very much. They're great. And you can see the solar water unit up there as well. Anyway, next stage, pretty much done now. So we've got the cladding there, and there's a bit of cladding on the sides as well. All of the fascia boards are clad, so that I don't have to get up high and paint them ever. So I thought that was a good idea. And that's what the render looked like when it was newly finished. And so that hasn't had any lime wash on it, but that's the full 3 coats. The other things you can see there, that's the flue for the wood stove, which is down below, and there's a wetback in that wood stove. So that's a copper box with pipes coming out of it that actually go up to the hot water tank. And these, that one was a Solco, but there's a story to that, and I'll tell you more in a minute. Those are the heavy copper pipes. So there's 2 copper pipes, wires. There's 2 pairs that go from the front of the house down to the back where we have the battery storage, because those are used for our solar PV system. Okay. Sorry? No, we're on grid, but there's more to that as well. We'll get there. That's what it looks like now. So you can see that it's been lime washed, hence the colour's a bit whiter. We got rather used to the colour before we lime washed it, to be honest. It was sort of a little creamy, and we thought that's rather nice. And then we thought, well, we're going to be lime washing it every few years anyway, and we can always add oxide to the lime wash. So we'll start off with it white, and we'll see if we like it. And we did, and we do, so we probably will. That's the way it looks at the moment. PVs I'll talk about in a minute, and as you can see, the solar water unit has changed, hasn't it? So it's grown up. So I'll tell you why in a little while. But that's pretty much the way it looks today. Now, we've talked a lot about the outside, and I'd rather focused on the house because that's sort of Strawbale bit, and people tend to like that. But there's a lot more to a house than the walls, and a passive solar house has other things like what's in it. We wanted it to be healthy, and so on the interior we have lime-washed Strawbale walls, or the interior walls we use bio paints. Quite good products made in South Australia, I think. Available from Going Solar and a few other places. Don't cover quite as well as a conventional plastic paint. Don't smell anything like as bad as a conventional plastic paint. So I'm pretty happy with them. All of our cabinetry, kitchen cabinets and so on, are solid wood. So it's pine that's been stained up to look like blackwood, or it's blackwood. And Libby has a special fondness for using the blackwood that was harvested on our property. So a number of the bits and pieces, like the vanity cabinet and other bits, are actually made of blackwood that was built on our property. And if you're thinking that's a way to save money, I assure you you're wrong. But they look really good, so that's all right. And it's healthy also because there's lots of ventilation, there's lots of sunlight. So, and the fresh air in the country like that just smells lovely. It's like drinking gold. So it's wonderful. That's what it looks like inside. So as you can see, it's nice and light and bright. That's the floor, so that's just concrete that's been stained up, an oxide sprinkled on it and trailed on. And then we used a sort of product that's used around pools to waterproof the paving around pools. So that's to stop the concrete dusting. But we said, please make it look like terracotta, and I reckon that looks like terracotta. So they did well. The posts have been sealed because they are treated pine. This is pine, solid pine that's been stained to look like blackwood. That's blackwood, and that's blackwood from our property just there. This is the wood stove, so it's a baker's oven there, and baker's oven below, and the firebox on top. And in the back of the firebox is a wetback, a copper box, and you can't see it, but there's a couple of pipes that go through, and they go up there, and they go up to the hot water tank. Lots of windows, doors. This is the only source of warmth in the winter to boost, other than the sun. This is the only source of coolth in the summer, other than ventilation. And the floor, yes. It's the house working, which is actually the main temperature control.
Did you have this house rated as an energy rating?
We did, but you have to understand that at the time there were limits on what you could get. So when hers was put in, the maximum you could get at the time that we had it done and applied for a building permit was 7. And so this got a 7 because that was the best you could get. It hasn't been done after that, but hers now allows higher ratings. So all I can say is this is at least a 7.
So given the cool climate in South Gippsland, how often on average would you light your fire in winter time? Would it be like 3 months straight, or would you be...
Keep that question in mind.
Okay.
We'll show you some evidence in a minute.
You have a powered couch there, do you?
I'm sorry?
Is that a lead going in the back of the house?
There are powered couches. Don't laugh, we might have a powered couch one day just to get out of this. Anyway,
Just asking about the windows.
yes.
The window you can see that
Yeah.
seems to have timber
Yes.
surround the middle.
Yes.
But no one decided to be painted it, or is that
Sorry, there,
Yeah.
that's timber as well, it's just paint.
you painted?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
They're not openable
They're
windows.
not open.
Yeah. All of the lights there you can see are either compact fluoro or LED. What you might notice, you see the wetback, sorry, the splashback in the kitchen is glass. It's not tiles. So we have no tiles in the house anywhere. I think tiles look very nice in other people's houses. But cleaning grout is a pain. We knew that for many years we would be coming and going. We would be using it as a weekender. There's not much point in having a weekender if all you do is go down there and clean it. So we deliberately designed the place to be low maintenance. So the floor is quite easy to clean. There's no tiles. There's no tiles in the bathroom. The whole thing is designed to be low maintenance. It is relatively uncluttered. Whether we can keep it that way when we move in full time remains to be seen. I hope we can, because it's rather nice that way. Any questions on that? Because that's the only shot of the inside.
So what have you used in the bathroom instead of tiles?
So the floor is vinyl sheeting, which is welded and coved up the sides. There are no corners in the shower cubicle. There's no corners where the vinyl sheeting is, and we have a glass surround, and the glass surround doesn't come down to the floor, it comes down to a couple of centimetres above the floor, so there is no corner to clean. So if you work at it, you can arrange for it to be, just to design out a lot of cleaning. And a lot of those things that people put in are just habits from builders and others. If it's a sort of convention, they can be challenged.
So did you say that the shower glass just doesn't go to the floor?
Correct. It comes down to about that height above. Yeah.
So I suppose you're against a wall, it's a shower against the
It's
wall.
aqua, it's like Laminex, but it's called aqua panel or something, which is designed for that particular purpose. So again, it's like having glass there. You just clean it, wipe it off. Again, very low maintenance.
And the shower base is vinyl.
One, welded vinyl, and coved, which means it comes up like that. It's curved, as is the laundry. So there are no corners to clean.
So is the bathroom sort of in the centre of the house where you don't have Strawbale around it?
No, where I'm standing here,
Yeah.
looking at that, is on the eastern side of the house. The bathroom would be just to my left. So
Okay,
it is actually up against one of the Strawbale walls.
Is your hot water electric boosted, is it?
Talk about that in a minute. Good question. Okay. So, moving away from water.
That designing out, is that from the architect? Did you go from elsewhere, that knowledge? Designing out features?
It's from spending 2 or 3 years with the architect and having our own pig-headed approach about what we want.
It's not a knowledge bank somewhere?
Oh, there's lots. It's not hard to find ideas for the maintenance. It's just that people tend not to ask.
The other part of the design as well is we want it to be something where we could age in place, and I guess you've heard that. So part of that is considering, how can we eliminate steps? How can we have things? So originally in the shower, we didn't want any shower cubicles at all. We just wanted it to be open space you walk into. We saw that in a house. Morris or somewhere. We did a lot of house tours in the lead up to designing our house, and we recommend that people really do years of research before they launch into designing a house. And so that's what we wanted, but when it came to actually building it, we found that the space of our bathroom and where we positioned the toilet, the floor would have been wet after a shower, which was hazardous. So then our builder said, well, you actually need a partition of some sort. So that's how we got the glass around the shower space. However, we do have a very wide shower door that swings both ways. So if you have to enter the shower with a wheelchair or someone with handicap, then you can do that. There's no step, nothing you have to step over to get into the shower.
And the door frames are a little bit wider
Yeah.
to, in theory, allow a wheelchair as well. There is a whole degree of art around design for disability, and there used to be a display centre in Box Hill which had all sorts of ideas, especially around showers and things like that. So looking at design for disability can be a good start, because they tend to, in the process of fixing things for disabled people, they also get rid of some bad habits that the industry has gone along for years. So that's a bit of a start anyway. But most architects, if they're challenged, could come up with it. It's just that people don't challenge them. So our space heating, the source of warmth for the house is very, very much the sun. Okay, so it's a passive solar house, and it makes a real difference. It's designed for good solar penetration. It has the thermal mass to catch the sun and keep the warmth. It has the insulation to keep it in. It works. However, if it's a really cold night, then you might want to put a fire on, and then we use the wood stove. The wood comes from our property, so we've never actually bought wood. In fact, we have more than enough at the moment. In fact, we have piles of wood we need actually to collect and put in our wood store. Because we're not there full time yet, the wood does rather build up. But anyway, there is a trick, incidentally, Monty would know this, to collecting wood. What you do is you build a new fence, and then all the trees in the neighbourhood will jump on it, and you'll have lots of wood there, because you have to cut them up and get them off the fence. So that works really well. So we've got lots of wood, because we did our fences a little while ago.
So how often do you get down there, typically, this time of year?
These days, most weekends. Used to be about every second weekend.
Would you light a fire most weekends at this time of the year?
Let me come back to something I'll show you, and then ask me that question again when you see the graph. All right, it's a good question though. So the wood stove uses wood from our property. So this is a country place. If you're in the city, you can't do this. But we're talking about this place, and it's a country place. And we have ample wood from our property. We burn absolute rubbish wood. Most sort of people who know about wood fires and so on will look at it and sneer. But it's rubbish, and it's cheap rubbish because it comes from our property, and we can burn it because we have to pick it up anyway. So we burn pretty rubbish and stuff, but it works well. Cooling is a combination then of having good thermal mass and insulation, openable windows and vents, especially the vents. And all of our openable windows have fly screens on them, so it's not a problem opening them. We don't have much in the way of external shades, although we do on the west side, and we could do with a bit more in hindsight, because the western sun in the summer is a little bit vigorous. And then on the north side, it would be nice to keep a bit more sun out in the high of summer, mostly in the afternoon. We have no internal drapes or blinds at the moment, but then we're on a quiet lane, and we know the farmer who goes up and down Wayne. So it's a nice change. And then the room is laid out to allow breeze. Oh, and we have a whitish colour block roof to reflect heat.
Was it surf mist?
Sorry, the
Surf mist?
the colour of the roof.
Yeah, the colour of the colour.
No, it's just an off-white. That's all I know. It's one of the standard colour block colours.
Did you consider a reflective paint?
Sort of a reflective paint. We were sort of aware of some coatings and so on. We'd actually tried some in the suburbia, and it didn't seem to make a whole lot of difference, to be honest. So we just stuck with a sort of whitish roof. It works. It seems to work very well. And then we use electric fans if there isn't any breeze. And again, that's quite nice. That works well. Electric fans have sort of fallen out of fashion. I grew up in the tropics in Australia, and they were very normal, but somehow Victorians forgot about them and they got into air conditioning. But ceiling fans work really well, and they don't use that much energy either, so they're good. Anyway, so now, it's going to take a while. Does it work? All right. So as I said, once upon a time I was an engineer, so we logged the temperatures inside and out for 2008. And this shows the temperatures. The blue is indoor, the red is outdoor, and that's from January through to December. And what you can see is, very crudely, in the warmer months, the temperature range inside stays between 20 and 25. In the cooler months, it stays between 15 and 20-ish. And I should point out that we were not here almost all of the time when those temperatures were logged. We were using it as a weekender, so we came and went. But most of the time, no one was here. So this is the house on autopilot. This is what you get when you don't light the fire or when you don't open the windows. So a passive solar house, just on its own, doing its own thing, behaves in that way. Really hot days, okay. There it got a bit warm inside. We would have had the ceiling fans on then if we were there. Really cold nights, we would have lit a fire if we were down there. So how often do we light a fire? In spring and autumn, when we've been down there the last few weekends, we've been lighting a fire at about 5 or 6 to keep the place nice and cozy, and then it goes out overnight when we get up, and it's still about 19 degrees inside. In winter, we would be running a fire during the day sometimes as well, unless it's a nice clear day.
How do you find the floating January with your bedroom?
Bedroom's on the northeast. No, it's fine. But we don't have carpets, but we do have slippers. So we tend to sort of wear slippers around the house, which is very comfortable. And in summer, we'll just go barefoot and get the cool concrete underneath. So that works well. So did that answer that's the best I can do about how often we light the fire, because we haven't been living there full time.
And until you're living there, you won't know tonnage-wise what you go through in
No,
firewood
I don't
in
know.
a winter.
We've got, I put aside about 6 cubic metres of wood store, which I'm hoping will be enough. We'll see. Ask me in 10 years' time.
Another stress-wracking brother, what altitude do you have?
Haven't got a clue, but if you know where Burbu is, not Burbu North, we're there. So,
And one observation, if I could, don't count on the slab to tear in around
That sounds like you've got a history there.
Well, we have had a wombat around the house. They like to rub up against the lime wall, and that might be because of the, it's something to rub up against, but they haven't dug underneath. The only thing that has tried to dig up around the foundations is the echidna that comes around and eats the ants. But then I don't mind the echidna, and it's lovely to watch it come around and sort of do its pest control. So, but the wombat hasn't started digging around the house. It has tried to dig around the earth footings of the carport that's behind the house, near the rainwater tank. So,
Yeah, we've got one that's set up home underneath the cattle trough, which is obviously flush to the ground. And it's just literally just dug itself a little hole.
Has it really?
So it's got like a bit of climate control and stuff.
yeah.
We'll watch out for wombats. We thought termites were the things we should worry about, but
Just like
anyway.
they inside. They won't fail under
I took this photograph at midday on June the 22nd, which is the winter solstice. So it is the time when the sun is lowest in the sky, and that's the sunlight comes through way near the whole inside of the house almost is flooded with light. And we notice when the sun comes out on a winter's day, the temperature creeps up a few degrees quite quickly. I mean, within a matter of half an hour to an hour or something, and the temperature's crept up quite nicely. So it works really well. In summer, and I have got a picture that I didn't put it in this pack, of December the 22nd at midday, corrected for daylight saving, that no sunlight actually comes into the house. Then the eve angles, the architect of the eve angles is perfectly correct. So there's no sun, but there is sunlight coming in the afternoon later on, a bit in the morning. We'd like to exclude that as well. Anyway, so sunlight works really well. Now there were, I'm sorry?
I always find, the solar lag of the planet really something to deal with. So you've got when the sun's fairly low in the autumn.
Mm-hmm.
How are you finding this?
Fine.
Early March. You get those hot days.
Yeah.
We have had some problems with that, and that's why we're looking to put some extra shading on the north and west windows.
What about in September, when you really want that heat? Is it coming in enough?
Yeah, it's comfortable enough.
Do you want to go back to the slide?
Yeah. Where's September? August, September's there. It's not bad. I mean, at the moment, goodness, you live in a tent at the moment, it's comfortable, it's glorious weather. But really, we just put a bit of a fire on it, right, a few logs to make the place cozy, and that's it at the moment. The winter hasn't even started yet. I better shuffle on because this is taking a while. Photovoltaics. We had a dozen photovoltaics at our house in suburbia, and they've gone down to the farm, and we've added to them as well. So we actually have two photovoltaic systems side by side. One is a grid interactive system, and the other is a RAPS system, that is to say a battery-based system. We have 4 panels on the battery system and 12 on the grid interactive system. The point is not to run the house on PV. The point is to have a battery backup. That's what it's for. Why would you have a battery backup? Because this is a country house in the country. When those trees leap onto your fences, sometimes they take out the nearest power line with them. And as a consequence, it's quite handy to be able to switch on the battery for a day or something to keep the essential loads, such as the water pump and the lights, still working. You don't mind that the fridge or the freezer isn't going for a little while, because for a day or so it's not too bad. You don't mind missing out on the TV or the stereo, but you do need your lights and you do need your water. And so our essential loads can be switched across to the battery backup, and our non-essential loads we would typically leave on the grid. Now, the way it's set up, you can actually switch all the loads onto either supply if you want to. So if I get really pissed off with True Energy, we might drop off them altogether, but then I would need to increase the battery capacity and probably more PVs. We've only got about 1 kilowatt of PVs, which these days is pretty ordinary. I'd love to have twice as much. And the battery capacity that we have is fairly modest. It's 4 6-volt, 330 amp hour Sonnenschein gel cells, which is enough to keep it going for about, well, it's about 1 kilowatt, 1 to 2 kilowatt hours, or about enough for the water pump and lights for a day or two.
And that's more for bushfire protection, because usually what does go out, if, you know, in the country, if you have a bushfire, is the electricity. And then you want to be able to see what you're doing, because it can get pretty dark and cloudy. You also want to be able to run pumps as well. So that's principally why we have the battery backup.
What is the rating of the inverter?
Which one? Two?
The REPS.
It's only about a couple of kilowatts, 2 kilowatts or something. It's a little electronics. And the Goodwin bracket is a SMA Sunny Boy, courtesy of BP Solar, who no longer exists in Australia. Those are the guys putting the PVs on. They're unisolar amorphous cells, sorry, panels, which are plastic covered, they're not glass covered. They're really good, robust panels, hail proof, but fairly ordinary in their performance these days. I mean, each one of those is 64 watts. When you can get a 200, 250 watt panel these days for peanuts. I'd love to have newer ones, but these are doing the job. That's the electrician putting it in. So there we have the electronics, the SMA grid active inverter, the 2 load centers, so one for essential and one for non-essential loads, DC charge controller, and the batteries are just behind the electrician there. All not a problem. The inspector approved it. The only thing he did want was he wanted some venting in the battery cupboard, so that's what those vents are for. But he was a happy camper. To my amazement, I was expecting a bit of drama there, but not a problem. So the Shire was happy with us, the electrical inspector was happy with us. We have tried to make sure that our loads are very modest indeed, so we only have fluorescent or LED lights. I used to claim that there was only one incandescent light that we had, which was in the range hood, but I replaced that with the LED now, so there are no incandescents at all. LED lights are just wonderful. They run on this Melbourne rag. We can light the whole house when we're there, 6, 7, 8 lights on for less than 100 watts, which used to be one light bulb. So, magic stuff. Refrigerators, on the other hand, can take a lot of energy. They're easily our biggest loads. We have a cabinet type freezer as well as a fridge, but we bought Vestfrost, which are a Danish-made refrigerator, extremely efficient, cost twice as much as anything from Harvey Norman's. Islandia, they use Danfoss compressors in them. They're really good. So the two together probably use about 1.5 kilowatts a day, so kilowatt hours a day. That's as much as a bad fridge from Harvey Norman's. So they're really quite good.
I don't know if you can get them here, but I mean, for 20 odd years now, I've been hearing about Sunfrost.
The American ones.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I have seen them.
I've seen them for sale here. I'm pretty sure you can get them if you're determined.
Yeah.
Rainbow Power or people like that.
Yeah, they used to, but they're an enormous market.
The best frosts we got from the guys Menzies brothers, who used to be operating out of Colac. I'm not sure if they're even in business these days. We've had them for a while, actually. Cooking, we have a gas cooktop and oven. It's the only use of the gas bottles that we have, but I like cooking out of gas. So that's what. For electric, we have a microwave, we have an independent induction cooktop if we really want to use it. The wood stove, we can heat things on top of the wood stove, and it's got a bit of the baker's oven, and you can use that in winter. You would never try and cook things on a wood stove in summer, far too uncomfortable. But it's sort of handy in winter when you get used to it to have a wood stove there. You can sort of warm your plates or pop something into the oven or whatever. And it's sort of an adjunct cooking space. I quite like it. Potable water, that is drinking water, we collect from the roof. We have a colour-bond roof, so nice, clean, sort of rust-proof roof for a time anyway. No overhanging trees. Leaf protection comes from gutter guard. Leaf filters on the downpipes, a first flush system, and a dry versus wet pipe design into a concrete house tank. We have something similar on the shed, which is a plastic tank. So that's the sort of thing I mean. By a dry pipe system, I mean that the downpipes go straight into the first flush diverter and then into the tank. Whereas what you'll often see in country properties is the downpipes going down into the ground, across the tank, and then up again. That means there's always water sitting in the downpipes which can go stagnant. So a dry pipe system, all the water goes through.
Did you consider a gas electric fridge when you stored?
Looked at it, but no, they seem to use a lot of gas, so it wasn't too attractive. I think a really good, efficient electric one is a better choice. Even using gas is a bit of a luxury. So your gas for cooking, I can justify, but not being on the grid as well. I couldn't get my head around. What I would recommend, whether you're on the grid or not, if you're going to be pumping from the tank, I really recommend having a pressure tank, and a nice big woofy one, like 100 litres. Because if you don't have that, every time you turn on a tap, the pump will start up. And most of the energy in a pump is wasted starting the pump. It's actually getting over the inertia of getting the pump moving. Once you've got it moving, you use much less energy just keeping it moving. So in an ideal world, you'd have a nice big header tank up the hill and pump up to there once every few days, and then live the rest of your life under gravity feed. And we have friends who have precisely that. We don't quite have that luxury, but a sort of a nice big pressure tank is sort of like a personal hill. So it allows you to reduce the number of pump starts, and instead of starting up half a dozen times a night, we see it starting up maybe once. So it's noticeable and it makes a difference.
Can I just add to that? I know sort of you out grid electricity. So they've actually got two EV systems, one with 12-volt battery and one with 24. And actually use 12-volt for the small little water pumps to do their pumping in a similar fashion, and it's so efficient. And they just use the 24-volt batteries for the other facilities in the house, which has a bit more stamina. So that was just a suggestion. I don't know whether you've had much to do with that side of it or not.
Not the little ones. I tried to use sort of the larger ones. I mean, you can get slow pumps that will just sort of pump off of a PV or something which is starting, but then you really would be going up to a long header tank. But if you're not careful, you can waste a lot of energy with pressure pumps.
There's another option. I grew up with my parents had a place up near Castlemaine, right up in the bush, way off grid.
Yep.
There was a nice big header tank, and there was a hand pump.
Yes.
We would sit out all the time. Yeah, send the kids out.
That's the way to do it.
100,000 bucks.
Yes. They're very expensive operating costs, but on the other hand, it keeps them amused. Water heating then, we have a solar hot water unit. It's a combined unit, that is to say the tank and the panels are adjacent to each other. And we also set it up, so there's no pump required to move the water around. We also have it set up with boosting from a wetback in winter, and we had it set up with electricity for spring and autumn because we figured that we might need it then. With the original solar hot water unit, we did have to do it then. A one shot is when you press a button and the thermostat, the heater element goes on, and then when the temperature of the tank reaches 70 degrees or whatever it is, the thermostat turns it off and a relay closes it so that it's no longer connected. So it only heats the water when you press the button. And that was because we didn't want it sitting there when we weren't there heating up the water all the time. So it's sort of a cute arrangement. Any electrician can provide a one-shot arrangement for you. But there is a better option still. So we went from a plastic Solco solar hot water unit. I think we must have got one of the last ones that was sold in Australia. And these are low pressure units. That is to say, they're open vented, they're not pressurized inside, and the only pressure we had to the shower was from how high it was above us. So we were getting 3 meters or something ahead down to the shower, which made for unexciting showers. And while that was fine for a weekender, we came across something which looked like a better bet, and so these are an evacuated tube unit. Now, not only is it an evacuated tube unit and they're very efficient, you'll notice that it's tilted up higher to get the winter angle for the sunlight, and this is an auto top-up unit there. I'll show you where that comes in a minute. This is a unit that actually has a helical copper tube inside it. So the pressurized water from the pump comes through cold and then is heated through the pipe as a heat exchanger by the hot water in the tank and comes out again pressurized. So the water in the tank isn't the water that actually we use for our showers or drinking or whatever. The water in the tank is just for storing heat. And so the evacuated tubes heat the water in summer, or our wetback heats it in winter, and the pressurized water can then be heated through what is basically a heat exchanger. So what we've got in a sense is a big heat exchanger. It works really well, and we have the best, we have showers you would be proud of. So it really is a very good system.
So what do the tubes do to provide heat into the heat exchange?
There's several types of evacuated tube. There's tubes which are just like a big thermos flask where the water is in them, and they're wet pipes. They're literally just glass tubes with a double wall, so they're vacuum inside the double wall, but they're filled with water from the tank. Then there's another design which actually has this pipe coming down and back up again inside the glass. And then there's these, which are called heat pipes. And in this case, this is a sealed copper pipe, copper tube. It's sealed at each end, and there's actually a bit of liquid inside, which is probably nothing more than water. It boils, comes up to the top, condenses, takes the heat out, so it puts the heat in the water as it condenses, falls down again as liquid. It gets boiled again, goes up again, puts some more heat in the tank as it cools, comes down. So they're heat pipes. These are the most expensive evacuated tubes, but they have the advantage that if one of them breaks, all of your water doesn't go running out of the tank. Now you might think, why would that matter? Because this water comes from our tank, and if we have pressure pumps sitting there, it will dutifully pump all of our water from our tank through onto the roof and out of the tank. It actually wouldn't, because this section of our roof doesn't go to the tank. We deliberately left that section out so that we don't collect water from it. So no, it wouldn't. It would just go away, and we'd be left with an empty tank and an expensive bill for pumping water. So that's the reason why we went for this more expensive option. So you can get cheaper approaches than this, but for a country property, I think that's an insurance that we were willing to pay for.
How often have you had to top up?
This is an auto top-up unit, which has a nice little solar panel on it, and if ever the water level goes down a bit, say it boils, for example, and we lose water there, this will divert some of the cold supply to top it up and then stop. So it's a little auto top-up unit. It's that thing there. Sorry?
Where would you lose it? Isn't that a contained system?
No, it's open vented. It's illegal and dangerous to have a closed pressure vessel heated by an uncontrolled heat source. It's what people would call a bomb. And so they have to be open vented by law. And this is open vented. But it doesn't matter because the water is pressurized inside there. Now, in summer, incidentally, we weren't there a lot of the time, and therefore it was boiling, and I actually covered 2/3 of the tubes with a tarp to stop it boiling. It was working so well. It works really well, and the water gets really hot. So it is an extremely effective system. I mean, why on earth people would use electricity to heat water, I have no idea. Such a waste. Anyway, once we have collected the water and once we have heated it and used it, then we dispense with it into a worm farm toilet system. Ours is made by A&A Worm Farms, worm systems. And this is a nice man, Alan Duke, putting it in. That's the tank. And halfway up this tank is a mesh screen, and you fill that with some nice goodies, with compost, with worms, thingies. And then that goes down, and all of our outflow, black and grey water. If you don't know what that means, it means the water with shit in it and the water that doesn't have the shit in it goes through. So it's a common thing. You don't need to have separate systems. It all goes through that. And this is what it looks like when it's in the ground. That's the vent pipe. And that means that it has regularly got air flushing through it, so much so that it has never smelt of anything. When we've had groups through, the German tourists, for some reason, love putting their heads in and taking pictures of the inside of our toilet system. So I think that has something to do with German males, because obviously the males that do it, but it doesn't smell of anything. Highly effective. So the venting works really well.
Also, we use it to put our food scraps from the kitchen, because there's a lid there, like a compost bed that you can lift off. And also, if I go out and do weed, cape weed or ragwort or whatever, it's great just to dump it down there, because you want to feed the worms. And so it's a combination of the organic matter and the weeds that works really well.
Weed seeds are never going to get out.
No, the only thing I won't put in there is blackberry, because I'm afraid it would grow, and blackberry can grow just about
It'd be
anywhere.
fine.
So I never put blackberry.
Sorry, can you retrieve the castings or anything?
No. The water that comes in when you flush toilets and so on goes through the solid matter on the screen. When the worms have been chewed through it, they effectively make it soluble. It goes down to the bottom of the tank, and then it's pumped out once a day or so into transpiration trenches that go through the back there, which is our orchard. So the water is collected on the roof, in the tank, handled in our house, used in our house, and then goes out through the worm farm system into our orchard, along with the goodies that we contributed.
Does the vent have a fan, or is that?
Oh, really good.
Yeah, but just passes it on.
The only, there is power to it, and that's the water pump that picks it up from the bottom of the tank and puts it in the transpiration trench. It could, in theory, do that at gravity, but we didn't have that option. There are arguments for having a dosing system, something that just pumps it occasionally, so that your transpiration trenches get a chance to dry out occasionally. It runs, when we're in residence, it runs perhaps once a day.
How'd you go with the council? They're okay with it? South Gippsland?
We were not the first. There are lots of these in South Gippsland. The council didn't have a problem at all.
In fact, the council itself paid to put one into a primary school or down there. So, yeah. This was
Do you
before
mind me
we
asking
put ours in.
how much it costs roughly? Is it really?
4,000 or 5,000. In theory, you need to have them inspected every few years. In practice, ours got inspected once when we insisted, and that was just not that there was anything remarkable. It's just they hadn't been inspected. So they're quite autonomous, really. By the manufacturer,
The
people who
composting
install
toilet
them.
can cost around that.
Sorry.
The composting toilet can cost around that.
Oh yeah.
It's good fun.
Sorry.
Did you need to do a cut-off drain on top of the transpiration beds?
No, the transpiration trenches
For the
are.
seawater?
No, it's just a trench. They're longish trenches because we have clay soil. So we have two relatively long trenches, about 20 metres each, all cut on the grade. And then the transpiration trenches have a plastic arch that go in them. So imagine a hole about 1 metre deep, plastic arch that goes in them, and then you clip together these plastic arches to make this sort of covered space. You put a biotech cloth over to stop the soil coming down, and then backfill it. And so you've got a trench which has got this sort of hole in it with these little roofs where the bottom is open to the soil, so the water just drains out into the subsoil.
The water that is pumped out, what's it look like? Is it fairly clear at that stage? Is there any smell at all?
You'd have to really be in the transpiration trench to smell it, because
Yeah.
they're buried.
Yeah.
There is, the guy putting it in, that chap, suggested that there are people who actually put in a tap and divert the water supply to water individual plants and so on. And you've got some goodies that come with it as well.
Yeah.
Now he couldn't, by law, recommend that or put it in. He commented that there might be some of his customers who do
Yes.
that.
How many litres per tank, though?
It doesn't really matter. It's a septic tank which never has much water in it.
No, not well,
It's just
a physical size.
Well, I don't know. It's a plastic septic tank, so I don't know. It's that big. Whatever that is. It is actually sold as a septic tank, but it's been retrofitted with the mesh and so on. So I don't know how big it is. But the point is, it only ever has water at the bottom there.
Oh, and just really great size of that.
So how deep is the hole maybe? Do you know?
A couple of metres across and a couple of metres deep. It's septic tank size. I could call A&A Worm Systems and ask them. I'm sure they'd like to send you one. We have other sources of water that we need around the property. Remember, this is a little farm, so we have water sources in ponds, dams, and other tanks. We have underground water, and we need to move that around through gravity or through pumps, and then we need to deliver it hoses or sprays or drips or filters and so on. So you have the paraphernalia of country farming, which means troughs for cattle and so on. So all of that's there as well. We've sort of talked about the house, but this is part of a country property, and it was meant to provide, remember, a fair chunk of our food. So that's my father and I levelling the veggie beds. This is our current project. Those are cypress veggie beds. I believe so. Cypress macacama, which is the one that's commonly found on the country properties in the area. There's a proper Australian indigenous cypress, and it's not that good, which is very hard to find. So yes, so it is macacama.
Is the water that comes out of the worm farm tank draining into that table water that you're extracting what you think is fresh water from?
We don't extract fresh water from the ground. We use rainwater. The only place where we get water from the ground is actually in the West Paddock, about 500 metres away.
So it's subsurface and it goes in, there's a slight slope, and that slope runs down into our orchard. So our fruit trees are sucking up that water. And our fruit trees are doing very well, at least the ones that are adjacent to the transpiration trenches, because it's nutrient rich with all of the worm goodies in it.
So we're certainly not taking drinking water from anything which is lower than those trenches. Okay. Anyway, so those are for the veggies. We've got most of the irrigation run to them at the moment, and then we've got to fill them. They're 3 metres by 1 metre each of them, so that's going to take some filling. Ask how we did it, but we've done it. That's the orchard. That's a peach, and that's a peach tree next to the peach. That's before the birds get to it, incidentally. They don't look anything like that once the birds get to them.
But do you have to net?
If we want to have some food, absolutely, yes. These are chestnuts, so these are, well, that's our neighbours or our friends actually collecting chestnuts from our nut orchard. So we have a nut orchard, and those are our cows and their calves. So that's, and then we kill them and eat them. So, they're calves at the moment. These are meat cows, they're not dairy cows. So we do get a substantial amount of food from our property, mostly fruit at the moment, a little bit of nuts, and certainly our meat is grass-fed beef, but there will be veggies on the way anytime soon, I'm sure. And finally, if you want to do some good reading, I recommend, of course, Renew and Sustain magazines. There are booklets from the ATA. Your Home by the AGO is the best book I know in the world on passive solar design, and I heartily recommend it. Michael Mobbs has updated his book, The Sustainable House now, so that's sort of interesting reading, and there's all sorts of other inspiration. Strawbale buildings, well, there's books on that as well. It's gone off the boil of late, and it's just become a little more mainstream, that's all. So it's less adventurous than it once was. Still works just as well. Any more questions? Well, it's really over time, but I don't care. When we had approvals, there was no bushfire overlay, so we didn't have to worry about it. I know the Strawbale community were trying to get Strawbale walls tested, and I don't know how far that got. Certainly you can find pictures of tests in the US and so on, which shows rendered Strawbale surviving incident flame extremely well. So we have no qualms about it. That being said, we've removed the trees from around the property. We keep it cut. We have a fire pump. We have the ability to keep electricity on for fighting spot fires with a hose. People die with bushfires, so we don't think we're taking any risk with the Strawbale wall. Quite the opposite.
Are you willing to share the total cost of this project?
Well, it was finished about 4 years ago, and I think we paid $375,000 for the builder. Yeah, that's about it. And then we've no doubt spent a lot more money than that doing other things. Understand that the house was never quite finished because we had built a certificate of occupancy as a saving measure for ourselves. So the interior painting, we got in the painter a year ago to sort of finish that. It was done to undercoat. There has been no landscaping done formally. So we chose to put our money into things that sort of got us to certificate of occupancy, and then we elected to put the rest of the money in later. So you can't compare that to paying a builder in Melbourne to put together a house for you. They throw in landscaping and 20 garages and everything else. So the comparison is not fair. But we never set out to build a house in Melbourne.
If you're doing it now, would you consider being off-grid? I mean, have you thought about the cost benefits of that?
Well, no. The problem with being totally off-grid is that we would have needed a much bigger battery bank, and batteries are very expensive. Each one of those 4 cells cost $1,000 each. So it's $4,000 in battery for something which is just a couple of kilowatt hours. Probably we would need in winter to have capacity to handle several days worth I tried to design it so we could get by, say, 3 kilowatt hours average per day throughout the year. But when you're designing to be off-grid, you actually have to allow for a week's worth of miserable weather in winter. And so you need enough capacity in battery to do that and enough capacity in EV to charge it. So we would have needed a system 5-6 times bigger to handle, to be off-grid. Whereas a battery backup system, because it is just that, is much cheaper, it's affordable, and a grid interactive system is far cheaper in terms of its capital investment than is a fully self-contained off-grid system. And we were already connected on the grid. When we bought the property, we were connected. So we had a different starting point. If we had bought a place that was off the grid, then we would have had a different calculation. I don't know. I do know one thing, and that is you saw that we bought an existing structure, and that actually meant that it's a bit bigger than we would have actually done had we started from scratch. And so there's one thing we've learned. If you've got an existing structure, it might seem attractive to use it. It's probably going to be cheaper to knock it down and start again. We would have saved money had we done that, and we would have had fewer constraints to deal with the architect. On the other hand, we rather like what we got, so we wouldn't have had as quirky and as interesting a place. So it's just what happened. Sorry.
Before you mentioned the
There's a local
like
builder.
houses, so like the South
Yeah, Gil Trees. Yeah, he was good. Yeah, he does sort of bespoke houses all over. So we went to a number of builders. Because a lot of the builders had never done in Strawbale, I think they actually put in a bit of contingency in their prices, and so that meant that Gil wasn't necessarily the most expensive, even though he does fairly good quality work.
So I'm considering very briefly here, so the style is fairly straightforward, but just anything that's outside of what their current
Frightens them sometimes.
and they just charge a fortune or unwilling to even quote.
It actually took us a year to find a builder. Between searching around all the different builders and talking to them and getting quotations, and it took us a good year to find a builder that we were comfortable with. Because we wanted a builder as well that was competent.
And had good tradies.
Good tradies, and so,
Last question?
I think you said before that the Strawbale was sourced by builder?
No, by the rendering.
By the rendering.
Well, they arranged it.
Yeah. Was that something you considered doing yourself locally, or was it
Oh.
quality concerns, or?
No, in a way they were taking responsibility for the quality of the finished job. So it reduced some risk by having them do it. And we didn't have a ready source of good quality straw bales that were compressed and so on. They had done it before. They knew what quality they needed and what quality of baling was required. And our builder didn't do it. We needed to source it for him, and we didn't know how to do it. So we needed to sort of put all of that on the contractors we had. So no, sourcing it separately wasn't ever a particular interest to us.
Just on the sourcing, I've recently heard someone say that there's a guy in Smeaton who is actually now growing, or actually does baling for straw bale houses.
You want the bales pretty tightly.
So that he has apparently experience and knowledge of all that air content and everything. So
Thank you very much for all the questions and so on. Nice talking to you.
Thanks, Colin. That was really good. I'm sure it'll be available for a few minutes afterwards if anyone wants to take anything up, and if you want to have a little stay and chat, that would be fine. I was hoping for refreshments. I do have some biscuits, but I'm afraid we don't have access to the regular tea and coffee. So you're welcome to hang around for a little bit. And thank you very much for coming.
We could try and delete my robot.
If anyone wants to see me about ideas for future meetings, I'd be very pleased to talk to you. And there has been some interest in the Melbourne Branch of the APA. So I know that some of you are from South Gippsland, so you can give me your names if you're interested, and I'll pass them on to the head office. So otherwise, thank you very much for coming. And oh yes, just one thing. I just wonder if people can tell me how many people are members of the ATA here. Oh, it's amazing. And how many people came as a result of an email from Sanctuary? So thanks very much for that.
Yeah, that was that was really interesting. No, yeah, it's just good to consolidate and just sort of. It did, yeah. Covered it well, actually.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes,
The best thing to do is probably and go along with your building. There are, you just start looking at it, you'll find there's lots of house builders with homeless grounds or a house, sewer around the time. So there's lots of
Little funny things. Sorry about it, we didn't see that.
It's sort of it's probably some specialised hydraulic, pneumatic ramps and stuff. So I don't see it as being very
Very done it, building an existing complex is going to be too. Let's go to forum.
I'm sure each day you will have
Oh,